All right. Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Will here at Schedulefly, and I've got Josh Dinar on the phone with me. It's in one of my favorite places in the world, Boulder, Colorado. And dude, Josh, I was like trying to figure out like, how do I introduce you? Because you own all these restaurants, you publish an incredible magazine, Dining Out. Like you're a busy dude. So first, thank you for taking the time to do this, man. But like, how would you introduce yourself? Tell me what do you say about yourself in terms of like, the businesses you own and what you're focused on these days?
Focus is a challenge these days. How do I introduce myself? I don't know, man. It depends who I'm talking to. We started with the magazine 20 something years ago, my partners and I, and didn't know anything really about the restaurant industry at that time. That's really, the magazine was sort of our education on the restaurant industry, and never had any inclination of opening one or ambition to open one. But over the years, talk to hundreds of different places and kind of, see the passion that's involved in it and the storytelling that's involved in it. We're just a little less smart than you and actually went to do it ourselves at some point.
I love it.
You ever think of doing that?
We've been doing this 13 years. I thought a lot more about it early on than I do now.
Yeah. Well, now is a real interesting time to think about it.
Well, how do I say? I have a lot of admiration for folks like you, particularly in light of the fact that you came as an outsider and were learning from all these folks and decided, let's give this a go. And you've clearly been very successful. I mean, you have a lot of places that you're involved in some way or another. And they're really good places and they're well-regarded places. So, you and your partners have done something really special in my mind to be able to play both sides of that's pretty impressive, man. So tip my hat on that for sure. Why did y'all start the magazine 20 years ago? The publication?
For me, it was about, I always wanted to be a writer. So for me, the magazine was about, I was working for Ski Magazine out here and freelancing around town. And that's how I met my partners. They had a magazine that was like a college tabloid. We were all kids. We didn't know what we were doing. They were hucking, ad sales to tattoo shops and I was, freelancing anything that I could, get a quick gig and a couple of bucks for rent money. The scene was just starting to come up in Denver and Boulder, like restaurants. It was not the restaurant scene that it is, now or has been. There were a handful of cool restaurants. Everything else was really just kind of, straight up kind of remnant from Cowtown. But you could see it starting to come together. People were moving in from the coasts, and inspiration was being taken to different cities. And there was a real push to do that. So we became friends with some of the guys who have become pioneers of the restaurant industry out here. So it was a lot of timing for us, and just got to see, not just like jumping into it now where there's, and I say now relative to not necessarily the last 6 months, but now speaking contemporarily, where there's, a restaurant on every block, or multiple restaurants on every block, but got to see the formation of a restaurant town, which was also really interesting because saw kind of like the pitfalls and, what made it and what didn't make it. And started to try to work out that eternal puzzle there.
Okay. Dude, you work for Ski Magazine and man, I love to ski. That's why I've been to Boulder and that's why I've been out West, and I love skiing. Okay. So you were a storyteller then. A writer's a storyteller. So you really understand the importance and the value of story.
And that's what I think a lot of people don't that's what I think a successful restaurant does. The most successful restaurant is telling a story without telling it, without hitting you over the head with it. But they know their story. And you talk to any of the most successful restaurateurs, and they know the story. They're not riffing or improvising on it. They may have at one point, but they've put it together and they can tell you what it is and why it is. And then they communicate that to their staff, and their staff communicates it to the guests. And again, it's, some people just want to come in and have food, and they recognize that. But there's an underlying experience that people, whether they know it or not, are being told. And that's really what we, came to love about it, is that it's this ever evolving story, right? You change your menu with the season, and and you change your menu with trends and what people are looking for. And it tells the story of the place where it is and the community where it is. And so when you can start to articulate that, then that's when the magic starts happening.
I heard a definition of stories once. It was like, I'm going to butcher it, but it was essentially a story as a character who wants something and has to overcome an obstacle to get it.
Yeah.
The last 6 months are one heck of an obstacle. It probably makes for some very fascinating stories on the other side of this, which maybe we're getting closer to, but there's a lot of, I don't want to take this conversation to a dark place or a deep place necessarily, but just briefly, there's a lot of sad stories that have occurred, unfortunately, for folks that are completely outside of their control over the last 6 months, which has been, we don't like to, focus on sad stories, but it's a reality of this industry right now.
Yeah. I think the only way that you can look at it is, regardless of how it ends for any particular business, ours included, nobody knows, right? You're driving with no headlights and, kind of feeling the road in front of you and trying to adjust your eyes to it. And get some sort of foresight. But the best that you can do, and again, I assume you see it, like what I hear from most really ambitious, really energetic, creative people, and what I try to focus on myself, is that the challenge is exactly that. It's a challenge. And it's hard as hell, and it's exhausting. And there's, places where you just want to curl up in a ball and, take a nap, and wake up when it's over. That sounds really good sometimes. But at the end of that, is, because you had to struggle through that, you come out fixing a lot of shit that was broken before any of this started. And that's one of the things that I'm really seeing, is like, this is an opportunity to take an industry that we love, and to, and that does great things within, society, does great things for the economy. It does great things for communities. And it's, it's this connection and all the reasons that we love it, none of them having to do with money, and fix some of the structural things that are wrong. And so there's so much like energetic figuring out. And we've always made the excuse, like, we're too busy. Like, we know that the labor model is broken. We know that there's inequity between, front of house and back of house. We know that tipping is a stupid, broken, antiquated thing. And now, and we've always just been like, we're too busy. We're too busy to do anything about it. And there's no like pivot point forced on it. And now there's a pivot point forced on it. And just about everyone I know is taking that opportunity to make change. And that change, isn't going to result overnight, like any change, in like, okay, now we're making money and it's great and everything's groovy again. But over time, and not a lot of time, over the next year, you're going to see these changes. And then at the same time, it's shedding a light on both governments and municipalities and the public in general, that are seeing how important the industry is. It's all of a sudden it's hitting municipalities that just like, gave restaurants such a hard time with all the red tape and bureaucracies and zoning and blah, blah, blah. all that stuff. And now municipalities are like, holy crap, we're missing some revenue right now. And they're like, we don't want this industry to go away. Selfishly, we don't want this industry to go away. It's what makes the places where we live cool and gives them some identity. And for them, more than that, it's, you know, it's $1 gazillion a year in sales tax revenue. And, you know, and it keeps landlords with money coming in. And, you know, so everyone is kind of seeing, I think, the connective tissue, and recognizing that if it goes away, it affects the life of not just these small businesses. It, you know, it really affects, you know, it affects life in, you know, in the places where we live. So that's why I think you're, you know, stepping up and seeing people almost treating restaurants like the nonprofits that they've always been, and saying, we want to support these things, again, like selfishly, because, you know, because we want them to be here when this is all over. We want to, you know, we want to be able to, and so all of a sudden you're getting a lot less pushback on, you know, fees being added, or, you know, I mean, we did it this year at River and Woods. We did a music series where we had, you know, some acoustic artists, you know, playing in the backyard every night. And these are guys that, you know, same deal. They were out of work. They all played festivals all summer, and none of them had anything, you know, anywhere to go. So they were piecing together little places. And more than that, they just wanted to do the thing that, you know, that they do in their lives. So we put them in the backyard, and we're like, we can't afford to just eat that cost of paying them. So we put it on the guests, and we said, it's, if you're in the back, you know, if you're sitting out in the back and enjoying this music, then, you know, we're putting $5 a head on your bill, and that's all going to pay, you know, to pay the artists. And no,
yeah,
you usually do, you know, or that you used to, whenever, you know, people were feeling like they were taken advantage of. People are putting on, you know, COVID fees. We're not doing any of that, but, you know, people are just, you know, tacking on things that make it plausible for them to survive. And in general, what we've seen is that the community is like, not, you got to do, just, you know, do it. So that's been heartening. You know, so while there's challenges in it, and, you know, extreme challenges, and yeah, some people don't make it out, a lot don't make it out. Most of the ones that we've seen not make it out are the ones who were like kind of tired going in, and like, we're just like, okay, I'm not up for the challenge, and I don't, you know, I'm not interested in the challenge. And so I'm just gonna bow out here. And I think that'll, you know, that'll make way for people who do have energy and that are looking to, you know, to come in and fix it all.
Yeah, well, I do agree with that. Anytime there's, you know, something like this, the folks that, it just accelerates a lot of things. It accelerates the changes you need to make to your labor model, or whatever. And it accelerates the unfortunate end to some folks' story, but then opens a new space and an opportunity for somebody new to begin their story and their journey. It's really an adventure, right? Like you're on this adventure. I mean, in your industry, gosh, as much as any, is truly an adventure, like a daily adventure, with fires, putting, you know, metaphorical and maybe literal fires to put out. There's just constant, it's like you're steering this vessel out at sea, and, you know, there's always, there's rarely a day where it's just calm and everything's good. There's always some waves or some wind. And right now you're kind of like, you went through the eye of this hurricane, which is what we're used to, you know, here in the Southeast. So I think of that, but now it's starting to maybe get through, but y'all are always on this constant journey and adventure, which to me makes it such a fascinating industry and an interesting one. And you know, we get to meet so many really interesting and thoughtful and intentional people like you. I think of this, like, I find what y'all do to be very fascinating. And I think that I'm sure that I've become biased towards the independent restaurant industry over the years that we've been doing this. So with that in mind, I mean, I always say, I think independent restaurants are like one of the most important assets of any great community. Because if you think of a great city or a great town and you go, okay, well, why is Boulder cool? Why is Austin cool? Why is, you know, pick your favorite city, cool, San Francisco, whatever it is. When you ask people to start answering that question, you're going to get, well, the restaurant scene, the music scene, like those are going to come up real quick in that conversation. They have to. It's like, otherwise it's, you know, like I think of Charlotte, and it does have good independent restaurants. It has its share. We're getting more of those because we have Johnson and Wales now, but Charlotte's like this business place. Like people don't think of Charlotte as a cool place. They think of it as like a place where, you know, there's a lot of good business, you know, banks and whatever else. But it's starting to have a lot more good independent restaurants, which is making it like a cool place now, or cooler. But it's a really important part of a great community. It's where people congregate and share their own stories, their highs, their lows, their celebrations, their losses. It's where people of all ethnicities and genders and socioeconomic classes come to both congregate and to work. It's like the real melt. Like, where else do you do that in a community? You don't. Like, there's nowhere else to do that. And maybe people are, you know, you touched on this, maybe they're realizing both at the consumer level and at the government level, how the things that maybe you and I think about a lot, that we're really aware of, that are conscious to us, that we're maybe subconscious to them. Maybe people are starting to realize that. I'm wondering if, you know, I'm seeing these things now. I see a little bit of a disconnect sometimes with what I read in some of the media and what we're seeing at Schedulefly. So for instance, you know, we see things like 50% or 80% of all restaurants will close if, you know, the government doesn't do PPP or do this or do that. Maybe, I don't know. Or I'm seeing a lot of things they're saying how many have already closed. I mean, we're not seeing that. I mean, we only serve independent restaurants. I mean, we've certainly seen our share of lost business, but nothing like what I tend to see forecasted. I think it's hard sometimes to say that, well, look, you're a creative group. You're extraordinarily creative, and you're a group of folks that if you're an entrepreneur and you own independent restaurants, by nature, by default, if you've had any level of success, if you got past the first 6 months or a year or whatever, that means you work hard, you're thoughtful, you're creative, you tinker, you adjust, you have to do all these things. So I think y'all will continue to do this. So where I see these projections that independent restaurants are really going to have all these problems and all the chains are going to make it through this because they've got economies of scale and resources, I don't necessarily believe that, because I don't think the consumer really cares as much about supporting the change. Is that because I'm biased and I'm trying to tell myself a story that I want to hear versus what the reality is?
I think it's highly geographical.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, that number, I think, is definitely, I mean, if that first round of help hadn't come, you know, early on, those numbers could have definitely, you know, played out. There's definitely places like San Francisco, Chicago, you know, where people just have fled the cities for, you know, and we're seeing it out here, huge, like, you know, in the mountain towns, like the mountain towns right now are like as busy as they've ever been. We have a restaurant in Sun Valley, Idaho. It's bananas.
Because people have moved there.
Yeah, everyone's, you know, so many people are leaving, you know, and again, who knows how long this, you know, this trend lasts, but people like were scared to death of the city. They were like, if I'm going to be sequestered in a place where the only thing I'm allowed to do is go walk in a park, I want to be in a place where there's lots of park. You know, so a lot of people are leaving, you know, really crowded areas for places that they perceived as less crowded, because they wanted that. They're like, if I'm going to be stuck in my house, I want it to be. So that's a lot of the money is leaving those places and going into, you know, the kind of more outdoor play areas. People are moving into their second homes, like that kind of stuff is happening. So what we hear in cities like Chicago, you know, Manhattan is getting hit really, really hard, particularly in Midtown. and so those places the restaurants are getting, crushed. Any restaurants that are relying on office traffic, like that's going to be a long time before those come back. So I think of it more as, again, as like a shifting, are there going to be half the number of restaurants? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, so much depends on how long this goes on. I mean, out here, we're bracing for winter. It's starting to come in. We've got wildfires. The whole state is on fire. So people are staying away. They can't be outside when there's, just covered in smoke outside. And that's, think about San Francisco, which has all that stuff, expensive rent, a city drowned in smoke, and crowds. And those restaurants are just, are feeling it in very different ways than some others are. So I think and at the same time, I think that there's like a little bit of a wake up call in those numbers, like an intentional wake up call, which is like, hey, we need help. We employ a huge number of people, 10% of the economy. And if you help this industry get through, then think that, then that's a bailout, like you would bail out any other, like you would bail out the auto industry or the airline industry. It's the same thing. It just hasn't been done, and within the restaurant industry, because it's so fragmented and difficult to bail out. Yeah. There's however many tens of thousands of independent restaurants that together make this industry, and there's 8 airlines and 6 car manufacturers. So way easier to give $1 quadrillion to the industry to the industries where there's a handful of players and you can bail out a whole industry with 7 checks, than it is to bail out an industry that's as fragmented as the independent restaurant industry is. But it's the fragmentation that makes it as special as it is. Because if you were to just bail out big chains, that's not gonna help communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a long way around, I think, maybe to your answer, but
it's great. I mean, you're right, and we are seeing that. You're right about those cities. I feel really bad, especially I've spoken to some folks in Manhattan, and it's just, God, it's rough. But they do need help. They deserve it. These industries that get bailed out, and the banks did 10 years ago, and we have them here, and it's just it's a weird thing, because those are situations where it's like, they benefit from profits for all these times, and as soon as they have a loss, we all pay for it. Like independent restaurants are already, you called it like the not for profit. Like, I mean, it's already hard enough. Like, and
yeah.
So
I was on a call actually with I know Dave Query is a regular with you, and I had him do a call with a guy out of New Orleans named Robert LeBlanc. I don't know if you know him, but really, incredibly bright, and creative, doing some really interesting things. And he said something that really caught me, which was, why we can't as an industry feel bad. Like, we're a for-profit industry.
Yeah.
And we're killing ourselves to say that, like, we're successful if we make 5% profit. And like, it goes back to the cost of food. Like, the government subsidies, and that, I think that's the root of the whole issue, right? Farming subsidies on big ag comes back to the root of where we get our food. People are used to cheap food. And then we're offering service and, and art on top of that, and an experience. And it's like, there's a cost to putting that on. And like, when my doctor leaves me waiting for an hour in the waiting room, I don't get to say, like, hey, give me a free doctor's appointment. I don't get to say, there's none of that, so, and nobody calls, there's no soccer team calling, like, the local, like, name your name your other industry and saying, give me a gift certificate for my kid's soccer team. Like that's us being part of the fabric of the community. We're thought of that way, which is like, it's great. It's what makes it so special. And at the same time, we can't feel bad about trying to make a business that can sustain hard times because it makes money in the lean times. You know, in the good times, I mean. So, and that's what Robert was saying. He's like, he's like, you know, why can we say that we're successful at a 5% margin? That gives us no room for error. It gives us no room for error. It gives us no room to be able to like, to roll with the punches. And so the minute something happens that shuts us down for 3 months, we're done. Like we're living paycheck to paycheck, just like our employees are living paycheck to paycheck. And that's, you know, for something that sustains the economy in the way that we do, it's so symptomatic of the problem with wage disparity in the country. It's really a reflection of that. And it's like, no, let's get to a place where like you can take a vacation and you know, and work hard and, you know, and do good and contribute and be rewarded for it, because we're not for profit.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. The subsidy issue is fascinating to me because so they subsidize big agriculture, corn and whatever else for, you know, mass production of essentially low quality meat and produce and everything else. It's also often sprayed with chemical, you know, all this stuff so that we can get cheap food.
That's right.
Sort of a commodity. And you guys go out and you find local farmers and local folks that make quality products that are made with not just with love and care, but also with health in mind. It's a myopic thing. It's an unfortunate part of like the way we often look at things, which is, oh, I'll get this cheap burger, but you're paying that. You're paying for that. No doubt about it. You're paying for it with your health. And you don't recognize that, like, oh, well, why is our healthcare so expensive? Well, part of it's because we don't take good care of ourselves and we don't eat well and we have all these maladies and things like that because we eat shitty food, and don't think about it. Like, you know, but I do.
I mean, you want to go bigger than that. It's, you know, that look why the US is having such trouble with coronavirus. Like,
yeah, that's right.
You know,
yeah, that's right. If you have a lot of these comorbidities, you're in significantly more risk, and a lot of those things are very avoidable.
It's avoidable by, you know, I mean, you eat healthy food and you fix so many problems just by doing that. And it obviously starts with dollars, and it starts with why am I paying, you know, X dollars for a hamburger? When I can go to McDonald's and get it for $1. Why can McDonald's do that for $1? It's not just volume. That's not the only reason. So I mean, we actually started, there's a program called Global Food Print, which was started by a chef. He was a chef. Now he's just doing this, named Anthony Myant. And he started this program, just won the, you know, James Beard Humanitarian Award for it, where he's partnering, and they're piloting it here in Colorado now. It started out in California. They're program where restaurants add 1% to every check, and then 100% of that flows through to these carbon sequestration programs. And you look at, and this was honestly, a lot of this was like,
what is that? Carbon sequestration? What is that?
Carbon sequestration program. So basically it's, you know, global climate change is caused by carbon in the air. And like, you know, we need to burn less fossil fuels. Yes, but there's you know, there's a theory called drawdown, which is basically saying like, we can take carbon out of the atmosphere just by creating healthy soil. And that speaks to like, you know, getting rid of big ag, getting rid of, you know, mass tilling on the, you know, on farms, and doing all of these very doable, very inexpensive and very sustainable, both economically and environmentally, farming practices, ranching practices that incorporate animals and incorporate like, you know, varieties of crops instead of monocropping. And that with these, you know, by us doing 1%, we let people know about it. And B, locally, you know, there are all these organizations out here anyway. There are all these organizations that are putting out these programs that you know, that do this kind of soil work. And it really is just about, like, again, it's an easy way to farm, and it actually reduces the amount of carbon, pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it into the soil. So the soil gets healthier. There's less warming agents in the air, and farmers are, you know, you can actually take deserts and make them green. There's a documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground, which has way too many like celebrities in it. But other than that, there's some really interesting, like, new kind of information about it that's not just all doom and gloom, but like, hey, we can make these changes and literally reverse some of the stuff that's happening in like, you know, not a lot of years, 25, 30 years. We can bring it down to, to really sustainable levels. So, you know, if we as an industry take action like that, again, we're convening people in our communities. And if we can, again, without hitting them over the head with it, just educate them on the fact that there's a cost to good food, then it's another thing that we can do to do better in our, in the places where we live.
Trying to think, what's the name of the documentary? Kiss the Ground?
Kiss the Ground.
Yeah, I mean, can't they take herds of animals and put them out on land that's mostly the desert and has not been, and just the manure and all the stuff through grazing, that they actually are able to take land that was pretty crappy and turn it into farmland and good soil?
It's amazing how fast it can be done too. We have a friend out here who butcher. He just moved out to Wyoming, but they're doing this stuff out there at this ranch in Wyoming, middle of nowhere, Wyoming. And so they've got a cattle ranch, and they started a program a few years ago where they got the local recycling plant to bring them all of the recycled boxes that I think a lot of them, for one reason or the other, wouldn't have been able to have been recycled. And they were just delivering them, dropping to them. The ranch runs those boxes through their wood chippers and uses the boxes as cattle bedding. That recycled stuff, it's free, so that it takes the place of hay, so they don't have to grow or transport all of the hay and put all the resources that go into that. And it's a slow compost, and it holds the nitrogen in the soil, like, I don't know the percentage, but some huge percentage more than hay does. And he's like, you can walk into the middle of the cattle, where the cattle bed, and it doesn't smell at all. And he's like, 3 years later, the soil there is as nutrient rich as it has ever been in the history of the ranch in 3 years. And we get all this bedding for free. And then he's getting shipping containers and turning the shipping containers into kitchens. And then they've got a cattle ranch right there. So the cattle, and Wyoming has there are other places doing this as well now, or just starting to do it, but this community in Wyoming, and it might be statewide, has kind of bypassed the USDA requirement. So they're able to slaughter cattle on site and butcher the cattle on site. There's obviously an inspection. And then, the cattle is traveling, from cattle to hamburger is traveling, 0 miles. And this little podunk town in Wyoming has a hamburger joint out of a shipping container that would be like the hottest thing in LA. And it's like a roadside hamburger joint that's like, that's net zero. So you just see these models, and that it's totally doable. And everyone just needs to, to step up and say, this is what we want, and demand it of their, municipalities, that's where the subsidy should go. is like, I get a hamburger now that didn't have to travel. Like, there's cattle right here. There's ash right here. It didn't have to travel thousands of miles to get to me.
That's a story. Those are great stories. That's the stories we want to tell that I know y'all are doing. And that's where, the stuff you're talking about. One of the things I find fascinating about this is there's a disconnect sometimes, I think, with if you're telling that story, but you're telling the side of like, this is what we need to do to improve the environment and climate change, you're going to get an audience of people that are like, yes, I'm in. But you're going to get another audience of people that are like, show me the money. The thing about that is, if you're good at telling that story, it works for everybody. Like, if I'm the guy that's like, I don't know about all that, I just want my cheap burger. Well, hold on now. Let's talk about, all the costs that come with that and the cost to you. Like, I used to eat crappy. Like, I grew up, I didn't eat well. We weren't, and I ate shitty food and a lot of candy and sugar and didn't take good care. And it's fine when you're young, and then it starts to catch up with you, right? When you get older and you're like, holy crap, it matters now. And you start to really peel back the layers of the onion, and you go, man, if I don't do a better job of like putting good stuff into my body, I'm just going to have all these ailments and maladies, and it's going to cost me. Like, if I'm thinking about the fiscal part of this, it's actually going to cost me a lot more. It may put it off down the road, but all these health problems I'm going to have are going to be really expensive. And I don't like that. I don't want to spend all this money on doctors and medicines and, all the procedures and so forth. So now I spend a lot of money on food up front, whole lot.
Yeah.
But I don't, but
yeah,
like my net cost is way below what it would be.
And you're one of the lucky ones that can make that choice. There's
for sure
a shit ton of people who unfortunately, can't make that choice, and they go to the grocery store and they're like, if they can go to the grocery store, and they're like,
yeah.
So, and that's where government has to come in. And that's where I think, again, that we as an industry can step up and make that kind of change to say, because I always look at government as the parent, right? If you're a kid and you're given the choice of eating candy for breakfast, or having a well-balanced, healthy breakfast, you're going to choose the candy every time. And that's unfortunately, where we're at as a society. We're the kids, and the government should be our parents telling us, like, you got to eat your broccoli. Trust me, like, you're going to feel bad when you got no teeth and you weigh 400 pounds. So, if the government can say, instead of, and it does that in the form of subsidies. And right now what it's saying is, like, go eat fast food, because that's how those, that food gets out to us. Cheap food gets out to us because of our government is saying, instead of being like the strict parent, they're being the loose aunt. They want to just be they want to be your pal. And it hurts you in the end. So we have to, be the adults in the room and demand that our governments do the right thing, which will, if they do, and that's a big, there's a lot of moving parts to that, of course, but, if they do, then that, everyone is better in the end. It's totally fixable. The problem is fixable. You just have to pick your point and start fixing it.
You're so fragmented, though. It's hard to find, like, okay, so you're talking about big issues where you need really good lobbying in Washington, but what do you do locally then? Like, you guys have this conversation, and you and Dave, and you talk to somebody in New Orleans, and I'm sure you talk to folks around the country. How do you advocate for change with your local governments?
Well, again, we're in Boulder and Denver, and that, we're in a lucky place where there's a lot of movement toward that, because because people do vote with their wallets. And what people, it's the reason that you see organic food at Walmart now, and that change happened slowly. But then it becomes a movement. It starts as conversations, and the more you have the conversations, and the more you use whatever platform it is that you have. For us, it's the restaurants and the magazine. And so how do we tell those stories over and over and over again until they start becoming, something that people hear and agree with? Like, what is the thing that resonates with you? And are you willing to pay 20 times more for a hamburger, that actually came from a cow, or mostly from a cow, than you are to eat processed crap that's going to leave you, that's going to take years off your life and leave you debilitated for lots of them. And how can we feed not just the people who can afford to pay 20 times more, than for that, and bring that into the middle, to a place where, when the dinner plate hits, it has what is good for you on it in all of the ways. So yeah, I think it's just about everybody just educating everyone as much as possible. And again, that's, I think, another opportunity of what's going on right now, is that people are right now, for the minute, are listening to restaurants specifically in a way that isn't always the case. And that is the opportunity. And you see things like, the IRC and the movement that when people get together, bright, creative, energetic people who know people, who may not have access to capital themselves, but certainly have the ear of people who do, to organize quickly and make change. And I think, again, we've seen that is, how we can do that. The IRC came together, in weeks, and was in front of the highest levels of government within weeks. And so, we do need leaders, and not just TV leaders, but real change leaders, and thought leaders. And again, I think that can happen pretty naturally. We just saw it happen. So I think that's been an education for most of the people who are paying attention.
Okay. Tell me about Dining Out. And y'all pivoted with this publication in the last year. So what's going on?
Yeah. So, Dining Out was, when we started it, was really just meant to be a menu guide for Boulder and Denver. And again, it was when we had,
Hey, Josh, let me stop you for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Have you been able to hear this ridiculous hound dog barking in the background?
I don't.
Okay. She's been howling like crazy. This is Lola. She's getting in trouble with me right now because she won't stop howling.
Of course you have a hound dog. You have to have a hound dog.
She's a sweetheart. She's a blue tick coonhound. Can you say hello? Yeah. She's frustrated with me because she hadn't gotten her exercise yet. So I apologize if she's been howling. She's quite obstinate. But anyway, so all right.
So anyway, we had been putting out the magazine. We were in up to 18 cities around the country, a couple in Canada, and the gist of it was we were a restaurant guide historically, and then when COVID hit, restaurants would pay to be for us to market them, essentially. And then when COVID hit, we were like, well, we can't ask restaurants for money anymore. So this was something we've been talking about doing for a while, because we were in the industry and we kind of saw the need and really wanted to create this place for restaurants to have a means of communicating with each other, so that they could share ideas, exchange ideas, and share resources, and kind of speak to those that supply them also, and be able to say what it is that they need. So we've been talking about doing that for a number of years. We're like, this is what we should be. But same as what we were talking about with all the other change, it was like, there's no reason right now to do it. Things are kind of humming along and on autopilot, and we're too busy, and it doesn't make sense to just, slam the brakes in the middle of the highway and make a change. So when COVID hit, we were like, well, now's the time. Choice was made for us. And so we, closed up what we were doing and basically said, like, we can't ask restaurants for advertising dollars, and we won't be able to for a long time. So what is it that we can do? And so we said, let's become a trade publication and put that together in Colorado and model it out. And we just came out with our first issue with that, have a whole new editorial, started with a whole new editorial staff. And again, the idea being that we utilize all of our relationships in the industry, all the people that we know, and give them a platform to speak, rather than trying us to say, here's what the trends are. I mean, we have our ideas about what they are, but we want just more and more voices. And that's exactly what we're seeing is, every independent restaurateur has like a handful of really great ideas and a handful of really unique perspectives. And how can we put those together into a cohesive story, so that we can keep all that fragmentation that makes it so special, and that is the reason why it's as important as it is that fragmentation, but also create a place where voice can be heard, and give a microphone, to the industry to be able to say, this is what we need, and this is how we can create collective change that will help all of us, and so help the communities where we are. Do you have subscribers, or do you pay for it with advertising, or how do you monetize? We're looking to supporters of the industry to advertise in the magazine. We distribute free to every restaurant in the state, and then a bunch of the other industry in the state gets copies of the magazine. And then obviously we're building out web and digital as we speak. Obviously all of this is happening on the fly, so it's ever evolving, and it's a pretty tireless effort. But no, the idea is that we want to be able to market for restaurants and create resources for restaurants and be an asset to restaurants without restaurants having to pay for it. Having those that, for historically and going into the future, are going to be our suppliers to the industry. So the food suppliers, the vendors, the tech companies that help the restaurants run their business, and that benefit from the restaurants paying them for those services, that they are the supporters of of that message.
How many? So you send copies to every restaurant in your database there in Colorado?
Yeah, right now it's just Colorado. So we're modeling it out for Colorado, but the idea is that it'll be replicable in other regions as well.
How many restaurants do you have, like, will you send your first copy to? Or have you already sent it?
We have, yeah. There was just shy of 10,000.
Okay, so they each get a copy, and then you have some of the suppliers, I would guess, maybe get copies and things like that.
Yep, suppliers, media, anyone who's tangential to the industry. So
okay.
And then again, hitting with regular web content on it, on the every day there's new content going up on the web as well. And we want to create digital resources, and then conversations like this, putting restaurateurs together with experts, whether they're other restaurateurs or experts in their corner of the industry. So again, food providers, or you name it, that are thinking about one specific thing, and then leveraging that knowledge for the benefit of everybody, for, you know, the entire audience.
Yeah, well, I love what y'all are doing, man. Thank you for doing it, because the industry needs it. I haven't, you know, it's, well, look, let's put it this way. Let's just be honest. If I had the energy that you have, clearly, to have all these restaurants and do this, I mean, this is what we, you know, ultimately started this whole Restaurant Owners Uncorked thing with some books and some videos years ago, and it evolved to the podcast and the Zoom series. But I mean, I you know, I just don't, because it needs to happen. Like, you couldn't find, there's just nowhere else this is really happening. There are other publications, I won't mention by name, and I've kind of dialed out of this, but there were some that were represented independent restaurants, but I found it to be a very corporate approach. Like, you guys really have your finger on something important, I believe. And I'm very glad you're doing what you're doing, and I think you're going to be very successful. So thank you for sharing these stories and for putting this publication out and for making this pivot during COVID, because the industry needs it, and people are hungry for it. And it's an awesome resource and opportunity for folks around the country. So I'm excited that you're doing it, not just in Colorado, but that you guys are going to go everywhere, because it is very replicable. And you've got so many incredible cities with so many incredible restaurant people. And I'm frankly just blown away a lot of times I'm just so impressed. I speak to these owners, I'm like, how is this guy or this gal, like, how is his or her voice not, like, how it needs to be amplified, because they're so smart and so thoughtful, and so, like, they're amazing people. And they're just like, you know, like I think of Karen Hoskin there in Crested Butte, you know, and of course her voice is being amplified, and she's done really well with finding ways to do that. But there's just so many smart people. Dave, when I first spoke to Dave years ago, he's kind of the reason we decided to do the book, because we were like, holy cow, this guy's brilliant, like brilliant, not like PhD brilliant, like really understands the essence of what it takes in this crazy industry we call hospitality to be happy and successful and helpful in a community. And anyway, so sorry for that long ramble, but I really appreciate what you are doing, and I'm really thankful that you're doing it, man. It's an awesome thing.
You too, Will. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so what else is on your mind, man? We've been kind of all over the place. I'll tell you one more thing I want to ask you about, but I'll hold that, and I want you to tell me what else you wanted to talk about today.
And we covered a lot.
Yeah, man. Well, one thing I'm very curious about is the conversation that is beginning to take place more and more, very necessary conversation about something that's been an issue in the industry for a long time. And I think it was overlooked for a while, or just not given enough attention, which is substance abuse. And you see things like Ben's Friends chapters popping up all over the place. And, you know, it's such a weird dynamic, because you have such a work hard, play hard environment. I mean, and it is really hard work, truly. And you need to find ways when you work like that, for the hours you work, and you deal with both the physical rigor and the mental rigor of customers and all the stuff that comes with your industry. You need to find ways to balance that with some sort of release. And a lot of times in the industry, it was like, okay, well, we're done with this long ass shift. Let's go out and get hammered, or, you know, party together. And it led to a lot of addictions and unhealthy habits and practices. You've been in the industry a long time, as an insider, and as an outsider with the publication. Tell me what you think about all of that.
Yeah, it's a problem. And there's always the question of, you know, kind of what comes first. You know, that, so
yeah,
you know, it's a little chicken and egg going on, you know, there's a personality that gets into this industry.
Yeah.
And I wrote it in the first publisher's note, basically saying, like, we're all addicts in some way. And you know, you can't do this and not be, and it's how you channel addiction. And so we want to be proponents, you know, in our restaurants, what we try, and I think what we're seeing more and more is being proponents of channeling your addictions in healthy ways, your addictive personality. You know, I think that starts at the top. You know, a restaurant's culture begins with, you know, how you define it. You know, we fought for a long time, for example, about just shift drinks. And we're like, you know, by offering a shift drink, what we came to, first of all, I had an old manager that said it best. He's like, you know, been in the industry for a really long time. And he's like, I can't count the number of people I've had to fire in my tenure. But I could tell you on one hand, how many I've had to fire for something that didn't involve drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
So if we take that out of the equation, then we don't have to get rid of people that we care about. So because, you know, a little becomes a lot really, really quickly. So for us, we're just like, you know, and we struggled against it because we want to reward people. We want people to feel good and we want people to celebrate. And it, you know, it's always our first inclination to say, like, we celebrate with a drink. That's how we do it. But if we say, no, let's celebrate it in some different way, that doesn't involve, because if a little celebration is one drink and a lot of celebration is 10 drinks, you know, then that's where that culture starts. So, you know, we just took it out entirely. And at first it was a punishment. And we're like, we don't want this to be viewed as a punishment. It's not a punishment. It's not meant to be a punishment. It's not like you did bad, so we're taking away this thing. It's like, we don't need this thing to celebrate. And that, you know, so that's how we looked at it. But yeah, it's, you know, you have to very consciously put health into something that is ironically an often unhealthy place to work. And where it's the most healthy is in human connection and people that work really, really closely together, and a team that, you know, that when it jives is like a dance. And, you know, when it doesn't is like a car wreck. So, you know, so how can we foster the dance and celebrate when that goes, you know, and celebrate when that goes well, in unlazy ways, because drinking or drugs as a celebration is lazy.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it comes from the top and the way that you communicate that in your culture. And the bottom line is that if you have someone who's working for you that isn't able to celebrate in a different way, then that's not the right person for your culture. Because if you have a drug problem, or a depression problem or whatever it is, and you're not addressing it actively, then this industry is going to, it pulls out the best and the worst of whatever it is. It accentuates whatever it is. So if there's like a seed of cancer, it's going to accentuate that. And if there's like a seed of something positive, then it's going to accentuate that, because of the challenge that's associated with it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's about paying attention, and being, not sweeping it under the rug and not pretending like it doesn't exist. And when there's a problem, letting people know that you're there for them, and helping in whatever way you can, when people want help. But it's something that has to be paid attention to, and that is again, another of the ongoing issues that we can fix by confronting.
Okay. I want to ask you another question about that. Do you have, how much, by the way, I've taken a lot of your time. You got maybe 10, 15 more minutes, or you need to roll?
I do have another meeting when we're done, but another 10 minutes, fine.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to go get this. Hang tight one sec. I'm going to cut this out. I got to go get this dog. She's going. Right. Lola.
Yeah. See how long it lasts.
Okay. Well, okay. Last thing I want to ask you, which is, I guess, it's similar. It's an issue that the industry has dealt with for a really long time. Conversations are happening more now. In some places, and I can think of Raleigh, North Carolina as an example recently where it's been a big issue, which is there's always been issues with sexual harassment, unwanted advances, and all these stuff that come along that, in and outside of the restaurants as well. And part of that oftentimes is probably what you were talking about. It's related to alcohol often. But the conversation's happening more and more, and now social media enables that conversation. So I've seen actually examples now of where this, what you may call cancel culture has really taken down some folks, or they go after folks that, frankly, some of the ones I know that have done a lot to try to really help their organization improve, but they'll say, well, this happened, X number of years ago. And so it's a really interesting thing where you have people that have a big social media presence sometimes. The challenge with that is that these folks will actually use their platform via comments and so forth to really hit them hard. And then, we've seen some folks run out of the industry, maybe justifiably so, I don't know. But I'm curious what you're seeing and the conversations y'all are having about that, because it's not going away. And it's certainly something that's been a problem in the industry. The industry's improving, but probably isn't where it needs to be. I don't know. Like, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I land, somewhere in the middle. I think, the first rule is, of being a leader in any way is like, don't be an asshole. And if you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the night, then that's the best that's the best you can do. And if someone, and create a place where, and it's really hard to do, but do your best to create a place where there's open communication, so that when someone has a problem, like it's creating a culture where when there's an issue or when there's a concern, that concern is heard. And, the bigger you get, the harder that is to do. And the more people you have managing and representing you, the harder it is to do. We had a manager, and we're not a huge organization by any stretch. But we had a manager that we hired, who just was able to put it on in front of us. And several months in to his employment, we had a hostess come to us and very was terrified to say something, but basically said, that, she was made to feel pretty uncomfortable, by this guy, and gave some examples of what had happened, which were just stupid. And we went to the guy and said, we can't, this is zero strikes. We have to let you go. And I felt terrible. I mean, I felt terrible letting this guy go, because my inclination was, this guy just, said some shit that he thought was a joke, and that he was flirting or whatever it was. And he just, made a mistake. And I was like, people make mistakes. I don't hold it against you. I don't think you're a bad guy. But we have to let you go, because we can't have this. And I felt horrible, because I felt I fully believe when you make a mistake, there should be a chance for redemption, because certainly I make them. Yeah. So we let this guy go, and then instantly, out of the woodwork, comes every other female that works for our company, who's like, thank God, this guy was a nightmare. And he was the biggest creeper and blah, blah. And we were like, why
didn't anybody say anything?
Why didn't anyone say anything to us? And that's the kind of stuff that can just completely infect, it's the cancer, and can completely infect your entire organization if you're not looking out for it, and reflect on you. We're there, defending this guy and feeling terrible that, we made a mistake when, it was happening serially. So how do you do that, other than make sure that you say to everyone, you know, when there's something, please say something. And I don't know how else we could have done that, and still it wasn't happening. So it's a huge challenge. And the best you can do, I think, as an employer is just model it yourself, and make sure that you're constantly communicating it, and not stand for it. And also at the same time, like, understand that the whole cancel culture, piece is horrifying. It's like, it's witch trials. There's once you're called out that way, like, you're guilty. It doesn't matter. Like, your side of the story is irrelevant. So you have to be extra careful. And then when you are extra careful, be able to, assuming you are, and assuming you can look at yourself in the mirror, say, okay, well, I'm just going to answer this, and do it as honestly as possible. And if you happen to be part of a casualty of that, then there's not a lot you can do about it if you've honestly done your best.
But I think if you've honestly done your best, that's what I wonder about. Now, I'm going to let you go, but it's fascinating to me because I feel like that culture it's a small group, and I feel like social media amplifies it and makes it seem a lot bigger than it is.
For sure.
For instance, like in Raleigh, there's all this stuff going on right now, but I had one of my friends there who runs a restaurant said it's like 12 people, but it seems like the whole city hates you and you're a horrible person. But I think that I wonder if you can overstate how, if it's overstated in your world, if this little echo chamber seems bigger than it is a lot of times, where most of your consumers and your customers don't know about it, don't follow social media, maybe don't have a clue what's going on. You're sitting there going, holy crap,
Well, the problem is, and we made this conscious decision because one of these groups came to Denver and was pulling this crap in Denver, everyone was super worried about it, and everyone was calling their PR company, and how do we answer this? And we made the decision, like, again, the problem is that media desperately wants clicks and eyeballs, and so media. The Denver Post might pick up on, fortunately they didn't in this case, but they might pick up on and be like, hey, there's this thing, here's this news story, and everyone loves controversy and they smell blood in the water. And that's where it ends up happening. And it's like any of these movements where it starts with like an atrocity, a black and white, like no holds barred, like, someone was raped. And then it's like, again, everyone's like, this is a problem with our culture. And that's true. In many cases, that's true. But there's gray areas, beyond those, like, those super clear atrocity examples. And then they go looking for the next, you're not talking about apples and apples. And you start, putting everyone into the same basket as, like, someone, drugging and raping someone is not the same thing as, as someone touching someone on the shoulder that didn't want to be touched on the shoulder. That person shouldn't be touched in ways or made to feel like whatever, but one could very well be innocent and one very clearly is not, or was, the intention was innocent versus like there was a bad intention. And then all of a sudden it's like this person and this person are like in the same conversation when they're not part of the same conversation. So for us for us, we said, we're not addressing this. We're not bringing it up, because what happens is it starts within the industry. Did you hear about Joe? He got accused of blah, blah, blah. And then everyone's talking about it, like you said, and the echo chamber goes out into the world. So I think it's, listen, if something illegal happens, there are very clear ways, the laws are on the side of the accuser in that case. So if something was done to you in your place of employment and you feel like you're not getting attention on social media, then go to the police. If something, real is happening to you. And until it goes there and you go through like the reason that there's a whole justice system, by me, I'm just like, you have to ignore this. This is not, this is not like there are not laws in place to protect people from this. So let's go that route instead of just, you know, calling someone out for, for language that offended somebody, or for, something that didn't escalate to something that was, that was devastating. And let's pay attention to it to make sure that as we can create a culture of inclusion in our industry.
Love it, man. Last thing I'll say is I think that y'all, one of the things you had, your son just went to school, you're a parent, your dad. I think that all of the folks over the years that we've been doing this that I've come to really, really admire, and I never thought about, honestly, until just now, it hit me when we've been talking, because you're talking about leading by example. And you said a lot of the things that you would do as a parent. And it occurs to me that so many of the people like yourself, like Dave, so many people that I really think do a great job in this industry. It's almost like you run your business the same way you might run your household, in terms of like how you treat your staff is how you would treat your kids. You're authentic, you're honest, you're humble, you're willing to admit when you screwed up, and you communicate, and you think of what's important to them and have their best interests at heart. It's why there's something so special about independent restaurants, because we always, it's like a family. Like, if you have your business, if you run a restaurant and you run it like a family, I think, again, I can't say this with experience, so I'm careful with that. I feel like if I had one, I would really try to run it the same way I try to run my household with my wife. And I would do that with my business partners, which is like, we have these people that rely on us for their livelihood. And it's really important that we lead the best way we can, communicate well, be self-aware enough to say, I F this up and here's why. But treat them like we would treat our kids, because it is a family, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and try on a daily basis to do that. And, just like you do with your kids, it gets fucked up from time to time.
Hey, man, we all do. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't control the actions of your kids either. And it affects. So there's no perfect way to do it. I don't think anyone's figured that out, but yeah, doing it with honesty and whatever your own sense of integrity is the best you can do. And got to kind of let the chips fall from there.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, man. Dude, I really enjoyed that, Josh. I hope you did too. I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for what you're doing, both as an owner of a restaurant and with the Dining Out publication. Where do people find you? Tell us about Dining Out website, and where else would you like people to go if they want to learn more about what y'all are doing?
DiningOut.com. You can subscribe to get a free copy of the magazine if you're in the industry, and you're not getting one already. And then, keep an eye out on the website. We'll be making some ongoing changes and growing it, over the coming months.
All right. And tell me, if we come to Boulder, where should we go to eat? Tell me about your restaurants there.
We've got a place called River and Woods, which is a little cottage down on 23rd and Pearl, with a really cool, unique backyard area, but it's a 100-year-old cottage. And then we're opening up on West Pearl, a restaurant called Ashkara, which is Israeli fusion. We have one of those in Denver that we opened about a year and change ago with some partners down there. I'm so excited. We were supposed to open in April. So that was good timing. So that's getting ready to open here next month. And then next summer, we're opening up at the Boulder Reservoir. We'll have a restaurant in partnership with the city there. So that's what we got. That's what we got in Boulder.
Awesome, man. Okay. And you got a lot of other ones all over the place, but well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Right on. Well, thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one. See you, Josh.
Bye.